Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Films. My name is Alan. We recently took a look at the human faction from the movie Avatar and explained why they weren't necessarily as bad as the filmmakers wanted to portray them as. Today we're going to go one step further into Avatar by revisiting our Everything Wrong Battle Tactics Analysis series. We're going to be looking at just exactly what the humans did wrong during the Battle of Pandora, a situation which quickly got out of hand and doomed the heroic and flawed expedition to this alien moon. First, let's take a look at the two sides. First, we have humanity represented by the RDA, or Resources Development Administration, a large corporation sent to Pandora to mine it for resources that will help fuel humanity's expansion amongst the stars. The RDA mission on Pandora is run by a civilian known as Parker Selfridge. He is the head administrator, and he runs all the mining operations and logistics on the planet. Beneath him is his head of security operations, Colonel Miles Quaritch. The colonel is responsible for the safety of the RDA operation and all of their personnel. He served as an infantry officer in the U.S. Marine Corps, and most recently he had served 3 tours in Nigeria as a part of the Marines' 1st Reconnaissance Battalion. Under his command was a battalion-sized infantry unit along with air support. Although initially tasked with guarding the perimeter of the main RDA base from dangerous predators, the discovery of the Na'vi forced the SecOps to readjust their strategy to fighting this guerrilla threat. This meant carrying out combat patrols seeking out hostile natives. The Na'vi were giant blue humanoids with monkey-like characteristics. They grew up to 10 feet tall, were of similar intelligence to humans, but aren't technologically as advanced as Paleolithic-era human beings. They are deeply attuned, and some might say controlled by the planet-wide entity they called Eywa, and heavily rely on the local flora and fauna for their military operations. The Na'vi are organized into hundreds of smaller tribes that operate independently from each other, but during periods of great strife, they were known to have joined forces. Although the moon of Pandora was equal in size to the planet of Earth and could sustain massive amounts of life, the Na'vi population was quite small and numbered under 1 million. This could be because of the warrior-like nature of the species or just their inability to innovate and progress as a society. Even so, the RDA operation was clearly outnumbered on this jungle planet, and even with their advanced weapons and vehicles, the human base could have easily been wiped out by the Na'vi if they were organized. The first mistake that the RDA made, which escalated tensions between the two species, was assaulting the home tree of the local Na'vi tribe. The reason the RDA attacked this area was due to the large deposits of minerals underneath the tree. There were, however, other deposits of minerals of equal size in other areas of the planet. The RDA administration, pushed by budgets and deadlines, hastily chose a site that was occupied by the Na'vi and didn't do enough reconnaissance or scouting to understand just how important this location was to the locals. The Avatar program only successfully infiltrated Home Tree days before the heavy machinery finally made its way through the jungle to the site. Aside from the pressure from corporate headquarters, Administrator Selfridge clearly lacked military experience and a respect for the local Na'vi warriors. Instead, he saw the Na'vi and their giant tree as another bump in the road for the RDA's mining operation. Colonel Miles Quaritch did, however, have a deep respect for how dangerous the Na'vi were, but was only in charge of SecOps at a tactical level. In an act of arrogance, Administrator Selfridge approved an attack on Home Tree, grossly underestimating humanity's ability to fight the Na'vi. And from a business perspective, the last thing his mining operation needed was to force the local Na'vi tribe to declare war on his operation by destroying their home. Even though the deposits might have been smaller in other areas, by starting a war, he severely jeopardizes his entire mission. It should be noted that during the operation to destroy Home Tree, the humans used non-lethal weapons to clear out the Na'vi prior to setting their treehouse ablaze. But the event was still traumatic for the locals and radicalized many of the survivors. The RDA grossly underestimated the Na'vi's ability to regroup and counterattack. The attack on Home Tree made the human bulldozing teams plowing through the jungle an obvious target for Na'vi retaliation. Given the importance of these machines for the entire mining operations, it would have been a good idea to reinforce these ground teams with some air support. Without additional support, the small attachment of humans sent along with the trucks were massacred soon after the destruction of Home Tree. The Na'vi, of course, were no more, no less evil than any other sentient species. But the destruction of Home Tree eventually would lead to the more radical and extreme members of their group taking over. Led by the traitor Jake Sully, the Na'vi quickly started uniting other tribes in the area. Upon finding out that Jake Sully had flipped sides and was now fighting for the Na'vi, it should have been a priority to find Jake and his team and arrest them after they escaped. Not only did Jake Sully understand the ins and outs of the SecOps military forces, he was also a human being. The Na'vi, despite being highly intelligent, lacked the initiative and flexibility that humans had. Jake was able to do things that no other Na'vi had ever done and became an extremely effective military leader, uniting dozens of Na'vi clans together into one giant mob. Quickly, the RDA found themselves heavily outnumbered by a horde of Na'vi 2,000 strong. Colonel Courage assessed the situation and realized that if he did not stop the recruitment process, the Na'vi numbers would quickly rise above 20,000, at which point SecOps would no longer be able to defend their home base and all the human non-combatants living there. Courage realizes a preemptive strike on the Na'vi forces gathering at the Tree of Souls is the only course of action to prevent a disaster and a massacre. Unlike Home Tree, the Tree of Souls actually served as a neural connection to the entity known as Ewa. The destruction of this tree would heavily demoralize the Na'vi and hopefully scatter their forces. Colonel Courage comes up with a two-pronged plan that involved a ground force that will land near the Soul Tree and advance on foot, while a larger force of Samson and Scorpion aircraft escort a modified Valkyrie shuttle towards the Na'vi position. The shuttle had been loaded with several pallets of mining explosives, and the plan was to use those explosives to destroy the Soul Tree. The RDA ground forces are mainly made up of infantry units with atmosphere masks and small arms. The ground forces also have AMP suits, which are giant exoskeletons that allow the drivers to operate larger support weapons. Even though the Na'vi are much larger and stronger than the humans, they are susceptible to firearms. But due to the heavy amount of foliage in the area around the Tree of Life, there is a significantly limited line of sight advantage, which favors the bow-wielding Na'vi. And when I say bow, I mean hand-carried ballistas that fired spears, because that's how large the projectiles were. The Na'vi also had a vertical advantage and could scale the many trees in the jungle and fire at the humans from above. They also used a variety of animals like dire horses and banshees as mounts to close the distance between them and their enemies. I would argue, given the terrain and the fact that the majority of the RDA forces were deployed on foot, it was completely unnecessary to deploy infantry as a part of this operation. These infantry units instead should have been left back at the RDA main base in case the assault on the Tree of Souls failed. There were still hundreds of unarmed humans there that still needed protection. The main goal of the mission could be accomplished by just an aerial attack. No infantry units needed to be exposed on the ground needlessly. The Na'vi had no ground-to-air weapons that would require ground forces to come in and take it out. The Na'vi air assets were limited to banshees, which were essentially flying mounts. The only reason why you would deploy ground forces in the scenario might be for a mop-up operation after the Tree of Souls is destroyed and the Na'vi are routed. But as we saw with the attack on Home Tree, the humans had no interest in killing the Na'vi. They simply wanted them to move out of the way, and in this case, disband. The RDA Air Force had a huge advantage over their Na'vi counterparts. The SA-2 Samson was similar to a Vietnam-era Huey in function. It was mounted with forward-firing weapons, but also had open cargo bays, which could carry infantry. It also had side-mounted machine guns to provide supporting fire. The Scorpions, which lacked the carrying capacity of Samson, were designated as gunships and used for close air support and escort missions. Both of these ships had an impressive amount of firepower. The Na'vi Banshee riders, on the other hand, were much slower and mainly melee aerial fighters, although some riders fired arrows from their mounts as well. Colonel Courage's flagship was a C-21 Dragon assault ship. This massive VTOL served as a floating operations base and weapons platform. With this huge advantage in terms of firepower, Colonel Courage made a huge mistake by underestimating the capability of Jake Sully and his forces. The Tree of Souls was located in an area that had a huge unobtainium deposit below it. Unobtainium had anti-gravity properties which not only scrambled most electronic guidance systems, it also created a unique biome of floating mountains. This significantly decreased the firing range and line of sight of Colonel Courage's Air Force in the same way his infantry was at a disadvantage on the ground. By flying his fleet right through the middle of the floating mountain formation, Courage puts his forces at an immediate disadvantage by giving the Banshee riders places to hide. And while some navigation aids were affected by the unobtainium deposits, We had previously seen that satellite imagery still worked, and a quick thermal scan of the mountain formation would have shown that the Banshee riders awaited the human forces within the mountain biome. The human forces could have easily detected them by scanning the mountain ranges. Then they could have fired upon them from afar by using unguided munitions. By flying in blindly into the rock formation, Courage doomed his forces and allowed the Banshee riders to get close enough to destroy the one vehicle he needed to protect, the Valkyrie. If anything, Courage should have kept the Valkyrie far away from the battle and used the much smaller and more nimble Samson and Scorpion gunships to clear out all of the Banshee riders. The small gunships still outclassed anything the Na'vi had at their disposal. Ultimately, the humans put on a heroic effort. The RDA ground forces were even able to turn back a massive Na'vi cavalry charge, and the RDA air forces managed to take down a significant portion of the Banshee riders. But the battle had awoken the godlike entity known as Iwa, which could control all of the local fauna, which quickly overran the human ground forces. Colonel Courage ultimately forgot his own speech about respecting the dangers of this planet. He rushed in blindly, quickly negating his firepower advantage. Perhaps if he had kept his forces at a distance, even the mighty power of Iowa would have been unable to withstand a wall of bullets and missiles. So there you have it, guys. The RDA clearly made some pretty big mistakes that doomed them before the Battle of Pandora even started. I think with proper leadership, though, they could have easily wiped out the Na'vi forces on the moon, and also maybe even have destroyed the malevolent entity known as Iowa. But I'm sure they'll cover more of that in the next Avatar movies. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. My name is Alan, reminding you that life is a movie, and you are the protagonist.